We're standing next to the main GRU safe house in the Czech Republic, the Saints Peter and Paul Church in Karlovy Vary. According to Czech intelligence, this is the place where all meetings involving undercover agents took place. And of course, it's quite convenient to do that in a church where most people in the congregation are tourists.
The Peter and Paul Church, or the Petropavlovskaya Church, is literally across the street from the Russian consulate. On the day the war began, the consulate was shut down and the diplomats were expelled. But the church continues to operate without any issues. It even holds the status of a metakion, essentially the embassy of the Russian Orthodox Church.
In early 2025, Czech counterintelligence discovered a mole in Karlovy Vary. No, not this one.
GRU agents from all over Europe use the Peter and Paul Church for secret meetings and operations aimed at destabilizing the European Union. The church itself is part of the Kremlin's machinery, said Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky, and Russia inherited this practice directly from the Soviet Union.
The church's former rector, Nikolai Leshchenyuk, was expelled by the Czech Republic and sent to Moscow. He was replaced by Metropolitan Hilarion, whom the Russian Orthodox Church Synod transferred to the Czech Republic from Hungary.
Во имя Отца и Сына и Святаго Духа.
Metropolitan Hilarion, known in secular life as Grigory Alfeyev, is one of the most controversial figures among the Russian Orthodox clergy. He is not just a priest, but also a diplomat, theologian, composer, and writer. For many years, he headed the Department for External Church Relations and published religious journals. He has written numerous articles and books, including biographies of the apostles Peter and Paul.
Before the war, Hilarion was seen as a potential successor to Patriarch Kirill, but then something in his nearly immaculate career went wrong. In June 2022, the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church removed him from his post as head of the Department for External Church Relations and sent him to Hungary to lead the local diocese. The exact reason remains unclear. Some suggested it was due to his anti-war stance. Later, already in Budapest, he prayed for peace around the world, though he still remembered to mention Patriarch Kirill.
Hilarion himself explained his demotion by saying he failed to adapt to changes. But in Hungary, he once again showed remarkable activity, albeit not for long. The Metropolitan became widely known not for his sermons, but for a scandal involving his cell attendant, Georgi Suzuki, who accused the cleric of harassment.
The problem in our relationship was that Hilarion began to sexually harass me.
The only undisputed element in this murky story is the harassment itself. The video shows a man in his underwear, strikingly similar to Metropolitan Hilarion, naturally a fierce crusader against the sin of Sodom. In bed with a young man, according to Georgi Suzuki, when he was ill, the Metropolitan would come to him and, taking advantage of his authority, lie down next to him in bed, supposedly to bring down the fever.
As it turned out, the harassment was only the tip of the iceberg. Yachts, private jets, diplomatic license plates, meetings with politicians and oligarchs, suitcases full of cash, and a private estate. That was everyday life for Hilarion during his Hungarian period.
When I was still in Japan, I thought Hilarion was a deeply theological man who wrote a lot, published many books, and made films. But after living under the same roof with him and watching him 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, I saw that he used faith simply to make money. For him, the church was basically a business.
A few years ago, Japanese citizen George Suzuki, who dreamed of becoming an Orthodox priest, wrote a letter to the Department for External Church Relations. Before that, he had only briefly met Metropolitan Hilarion during one of his visits to Japan.
We talked a few times over Zoom and in correspondence, and several times he invited me to come to Russia.
But those plans were derailed by COVID and the war in Ukraine. When Hilarion was reassigned to Hungary, Suzuki decided to offer his support. He wrote that he was ready to come to Budapest and become the Metropolitan's personal assistant. According to Suzuki, it was meant as a polite Japanese gesture. He never imagined Hilarion would actually accept the offer.
I wrote a letter saying that if needed, I could become his assistant. To my surprise, he agreed.
In Hungary, events took a completely unexpected turn. Within a month, Suzuki was moved into the same apartment as the Metropolitan, And according to the aide, Hilarion began to harass him.
«Не спасли духа твоего святаго ныне и на предлежащее дарование».
Через месяц уже.
A month later, I was already moved in. From then on, I lived with him for a year and a half. To begin with, I'll say what the problems in our relationship were. The problem was that he began to sexually harass me. I was the first to accuse him personally of this. A criminal case has been opened against Hilarion in Budapest, and a police investigation is underway.
Unlike other hierarchs of the Russian Orthodox Church, Father Hilarion did not have a clear position on key events of the day, not even on the war in Ukraine.
И в Америке, и в Украине, и в России есть такие политики, которые считают, что война – это правильное решение.
According to Suzuki, the Metropolitan preferred to take whatever position happened to be advantageous at the time.
Даже касающийся насчет войны.
Even when it came to the war, Hilarion's approach was always to choose whatever was more beneficial for him at that particular moment.
The Russian Orthodox Church's representative in Budapest rarely communicated with parishioners or other clergy, but he met with the Russian ambassador to Hungary every month. Since 2021, that post has been held by Yevgeny Stanislavov.
Suzuki says these meetings sometimes took place at the Russian embassy, or in expensive restaurants, or at Hilarion's episcopal residence. Hilarion's aide, Vyacheslav Lee, met with Russian diplomats even more often. Almost every week, all of these meetings were informal. The priests' activities weren't limited to talks with their presumed handlers. At least once a month, the Metropolitan also met with Hungary's Deputy Prime Minister, Zsolt Semjén.
Semjén would visit Father Hilarion at the church, and on one occasion he organized a concert in which a Hungarian orchestra performed Hilarion's music. Likely not by coincidence, the Metropolitan's Christmas oratorio premiered in Budapest in December 2022.
Although Semjén holds a doctorate in theology, it's unlikely that his conversations with the priest were purely spiritual.
Приезжала, кстати, его
By the way, the minister's wife also came to visit. When they were served tea, he asked me to make some sweets. So I made a Japanese dessert for the minister's wife, and she liked it so much she even asked me for the recipe.
Most of Hilarion's meetings with the Russian ambassador and Hungary's deputy prime minister were held one-on-one. No one else was allowed in, neither from the Russian nor the Hungarian side. But after these meetings, the Metropolitan would share some information with his aides. Hilarion's friendship with Hungarian officials goes back a long way. From 2003 to 2009, he headed the Hungarian diocese, and in December 2013, he met with Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán. After that meeting, Semjén paid a visit to Patriarch Kirill. In 2019, Hilarion received the Hungarian Order of Merit from Semjén, presenting it on behalf of Orbán. The Russian Orthodox Church reciprocated. On Semjén's 60th birthday, he was awarded the Order of Glory and Honor by Patriarch Kirill, and it was Hilarion who presented it to him.
несколько раз за мое
While I was there, he even met with Orbán several times. Less often than with Semjén, but with the Deputy Prime Minister, he met very frequently.
According to Novaya Gazeta, Hilarion and Orbán have known each other since the 1990s, when they both studied at Pembroke College at the University of Oxford. After one of their meetings, Hilarion obtained Hungarian citizenship, completing the process after only a few months. As a result, since September 2022, it has become much more difficult to deport him from the European Union. It is possible that Hilarion acted as an intermediary between the Hungarian authorities and Russian oligarchs, and most likely benefited from it himself.
Hilarion будет венгерскому государству.
Hilarion would offer certain Russian oligarchs or clients to the Hungarian government, and in return, the Hungarian side would provide them with certain favors. These clients, in turn, would offer reciprocal benefits, either to the Hungarian authorities or directly to the Prime Minister. And Hilarion received his share for bringing the two sides together.
Suzuki says that at one point it was discovered that funds allocated by the Hungarian government to the Budapest diocese, supposedly for church restorations, had gone missing. The situation was resolved thanks to Semjén, who in a very Christian manner forgave all the Russian church's debts. According to Suzuki, during meetings with Semjén, they discussed granting Hungarian residence permits to Russian businessmen in exchange either for investments or for straightforward bribes.
Да, они действительно это делали.
Yes, they really did that. And not only residence permits. They also made profits of several million euros.
The circle of Metropolitan Hilarion's connections and interests wasn't limited to politicians and diplomats. He was also eager to meet with businessmen and oligarchs, according to Suzuki, purely for personal gain.
Hilarion очень часто встречался с...
Hilarion often met with businessmen and oligarchs, and the goal was always the same, to get them to sponsor Metropolitan Hilarion.
Father Hilarion did not intend to use the money he received from businessmen for church needs.
Его личная жизнь это...
His personal life was far from modest monastic living, where there isn't even enough money for daily bread. He had very expensive cars, luxury homes, and not just in one country, but in several.
Dubai became the priest's favorite place for meeting with oligarchs.
Hilarion часто встречался с олигархами.
Hilarion often met with oligarchs specifically in Dubai, because for Russian oligarchs it was easy and convenient to come there, and for Hilarion too. When I was present, they met in Dubai at least 3 times.
For example, here is Metropolitan Hilarion taking a boat ride on the artificial river of the Jumeirah Mina Assalam Hotel. Oligarchs would buy him business-class tickets. He flew to the Emirates and asked them for money, supposedly for the church. The Russian Orthodox priest literally stuffed cash into a suitcase and flew off with it to Hungary, just like in a B-movie spy thriller.
В Дубае я видел, что олигарх...
In Dubai, I saw an oligarch hand him quite a large sum, cash. And when it came to moving that cash, I'm telling you, he put it in a suitcase and carried it by plane to Hungary.
Among Hilarion's luggage was a Louis Vuitton suitcase, but whether that was the one he used to carry money from Dubai, Suzuki did not specify.
Я не знаю, о каких именно суммах.
I don't know exactly how much money it was, but he split it up. Even his assistants helped, I and one other person, because it wasn't possible for one person to transport that much money alone.
Hilarion, who was supposed to be a monk, explained that his luxury items were gifts from well-wishers. Among these gifts were cars. For example, Metropolitan Hilarion's BMW X7 with license plates reading MH, standing for Metropolitan Hilarion. According to Suzuki, that BMW was a gift from one of the oligarch sponsors, and not the first one. The ascetic Hilarion also decided to add another item to the list of gifts the grace of God had granted him: diplomatic license plates, which he obtained through the Russian embassy in Hungary. He needed the plates in order to drive around traffic jams in Budapest. Suzuki says Hilarion's car was specially delivered from Russia, along with a certain diplomatic bus. Suitcases of cash were not the only way he received money from oligarchs. Some of the funds were transferred directly to Hilarion's foundations in Russia and Hungary.
В основном он получал...
Mostly he received money through his Russian foundation. He has many foundations in Russia and several in Budapest as well. Russian oligarchs made payments to his Russian foundation.
Before the war, the priest could transfer money to Europe without a problem. But that golden stream dried up when sanctions were imposed.
So he started transferring money through third countries. For example, Armenia. That's how he did it.
In Hungary, the money went to the Foundation for Hungarian Orthodox Culture, which accepts donations from local residents on behalf of the Russian Orthodox Church's diocese. This means that even today, an EU citizen can still transfer money to representatives of Putin's regime in a perfectly legal manner. However, Hilarion's main foundations are registered in Russia: the St. Gregory the Theologian Foundation and the Poznani Foundation. Both are headed by a certain Ivan Alexandrovich Parfyonov. Notably, in 2022, a man of the same name sat on the Russian Orthodox Church's Publishing Council and headed the Poznani Publishing House, an entity that issues books written by Metropolitan Hilarion himself. The publisher's online catalog makes clear that Hilarion is its most prolific author. Before Parfyonov held the post, the general director of the Poznani Foundation was Hieromonk Ioan Kopeikin, who served as an assistant to Hilarion in the 2000s, when the Metropolitan was still overseeing the external relations of the Russian Orthodox Church. It was Hilarion himself who elevated Kopeikin to the rank of Hieromonk. In recent years, he lived in Switzerland, where he was a doctoral student at the University of Freiburg. It is not exactly clear where Kopeikin is at the moment. 2 years ago, Patriarch Kirill even banned him from acting as a monk or serving in the church until his whereabouts could be established. Hilarion's main sponsor, according to Suzuki, is Russian billionaire Dmitry Pompiansky. Since 2022, Pompiansky has been under sanctions from Ukraine, the European Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, and Switzerland over his support for the war and has a close ties to Putin's regime.
Дмитрий Пумпянский.
Dmitry Pumpyansky regularly gave him large sums of money. He was his main sponsor, you could even say.
One of the few who dared to refuse Hilarion was Valery Kogan, an Israeli resident and de facto co-owner of Moscow's Domodedovo airport. The priest tried to get closer to the businessman by talking with his Orthodox wife and granddaughter, but nothing came of it. Hilarion left Israel empty-handed.
Где будет сокровище ваше, там будет и сердце ваше. Если ваше сокровище в материальном мире и в материальном богатстве, то и сердце ваше будет к этому привязано.
Hilarion told his sponsors that he wanted to build an Orthodox monastery or hermitage in Hungary. In reality, no matter how hard he might have tried to do otherwise, it came out as a palace for personal use.
In fact, it was just a palace, with swimming pools, luxurious saunas, and all the trappings.
This is the layout of Hilarion's Hungarian estate, which he calls a hermitage. Here is the Metropolitan's private pool, and here's the owner himself in the garden of his modest hermitage. Incidentally, this is not Hilarion's only property, and other Russian Orthodox hierarchs have their own. Hilarion seems to be drawn to Lake Geneva. On its shore, in the French village of Mailerie, Novaya Gazeta Europe found a modest house belonging to him. They say the man in this 1971 photograph is the future patriarch Kirill. Upon his arrival in Geneva, he took up skiing in the Swiss Alps. After all, there is something besides orthodoxy that connects him with Hilarion. According to Suzuki, the Metropolitan also spent money on his Russian assistants, who had nothing to do in Hungary. Hilarion apparently offered his former cell attendant financial support in exchange for his silence, both about the sexual harassment and about the clergyman's non-church affairs.
Когда я уехал с...
When I decided to leave Hilarion, he even offered me money. But I told him, no, let me get money as a salary from the foundation. And I understood it was basically a bribe for my silence. So the money for silence meant I was taking money from Hilarion, but staying quiet about his activities. Meanwhile, his interest toward me remained sexual in nature. I refused.
Even before Georgie's departure, Hilarion started threatening his cell attendant, apparently out of jealousy. It began on a yacht in Sardinia, owned by yet another oligarch. The oligarch suggested that Georgie marry one of his daughters.
Это было в сентябре 23 года.
This was in September 2023. At that time, Hilarion was meeting with oligarchs in Italy and Sardinia. The oligarch said to me, I have 3 daughters. Pick one, you'll marry her. That was the conversation. Hilarion smiled and said, no, he will be a monk and stay with me. I think he was jealous because he considered this a personal matter.
When Georgie hinted that he might return to Japan, the Metropolitan threatened him.
Явно стал выражать, что я тебе не...
He clearly threatened me, saying, I won't let you go anywhere. And if you do, I'll make you regret leaving me for the rest of your life.
Suzuki took Hilarion's threats seriously and didn't flee immediately. He waited until the Metropolitan was resting at his estate after an illness. On January 4th, 2024, Hilarion's closest assistants were in the city, and Suzuki decided to take advantage, thinking he might be under surveillance. At 3 a.m., he moved his belongings to a hotel, then headed to the airport. The escape to Japan succeeded, although Georgie feared obstacles until the very last moment.
Я знал, что в Истамбуле у Илариона тоже...
I knew Hilarion also had connections in Istanbul. That is, a familiar oligarch who could do anything inside Istanbul airport. So I was very worried. But in the end, of course, I managed to get through.
Suzuki categorically denies any accusation that he stole any of the Metropolitan's watches. Hilarion had several expensive watches, just like his boss. The head of the diocese even planned to give one of them to Orbán.
У него были несколько часы и очень такие...
He had several very expensive watches. Not just ordinary watches, but Rolexes, Patek Philippe's, that level. Hilarion told me, I trust you, maybe keep these watches with you, keep them safe, because I want to give them as a gift, say, to Orbán. But aside from a bribe, it's hard to imagine another reason, because normally a hierarch wouldn't give expensive watches to just any prime minister.
Suzuki decided to take the watches as collateral and, if needed, to exchange them for his freedom. He doesn't consider it theft because Hilarion himself entrusted the watches to him.
Во-первых, это не кража, потому
First,
что
it's not
Hilarion
theft,
как,
because
ну,
Hilarion,
Hilarion
as he
мне
told me,
доверил, и он мне
entrusted them
доверил.
to me for safekeeping.
И неважно, они были
It
в
didn't
моей
matter whether they were
кровати
under my
или
bed or
они
in my
были у меня,
suitcase.
например, в чемодане.
After arriving in Japan, Georgie called the Japanese ambassador in Hungary and asked for help returning the Metropolitan's belongings. Even though Hilarion soon got the property back, he refused to close the case against Suzuki.
В кампании против меня участвуют лица, находящиеся в международном розыске, представители криминального мира, враждебная России пресса, спецслужбы, лишенные сана бывшие священнослужители.
The pressure, the former aide says, will continue unless he comes out and publicly states that the Metropolitan never harassed him. In addition, Hilarion demanded that Suzuki shut down his YouTube and Telegram channels. Suzuki refused, and he is still listed as wanted internationally. The Hungarian police database now has 3 records under Suzuki's name. He is wanted simultaneously in Hungary, Europe, and internationally on suspicion of theft. Suzuki claims that Hilarion has also become a subject of a criminal investigation in Hungary, both for sexual harassment and defamation. But the Hungarian police are not pursuing the case with much enthusiasm, and the Metropolitan has simply ignored court summonses. Hilarion's surname, Alfeyev, cannot be found in the database of wanted individuals. In early 2025, Hilarion resurfaced in the Czech Republic, but only formally. Suzuki's source believes the Metropolitan still actually lives in his estate outside Budapest.
По одним источникам, которые... я
According to
узнал,
sources I trust,
что всё,
I
что
learned that he is
находится в
indeed in Hungary,
и,
and most
скорее
likely in the
всего,
palace he
в
purchased.
In Karlovy, he only appears for Sunday services, and not every week. Presumably, Hilarion drives there, and then returns to his Hungarian residence. Whether he can be an effective spy on this schedule, like Agent Mikhailov, better known as Patriarch Kirill, remains to be seen. In September, a major scandal erupted in Hungary involving accusations against Deputy Prime Minister Semjén. Some Hungarian bloggers and opposition members suspected him of pedophilia. The focus fell on the Budapest Correctional Facility. Some media outlets call it a children's home, but in reality, it is a boarding colony for juvenile offenders. It houses only boys aged 12 and older. They are educated, disciplined, and made to work like real prisoners. In an interview with Hungarian video blogger Péter Juhos, an anonymous speaker named a well-known politician, Uncle Zsolt. This uncle allegedly engaged in lewd acts toward children. The Hungarian opposition took interest and demanded that Semjén explain who this Uncle Zsolt is. They promised to investigate which members of the Hungarian government might be involved. Semjén responded that all of the claims constitute brazen lies, slander, and accusations of Beelzebub from the Bible. He stated that he is a sworn enemy of pedophilia. Prime Minister Orbán also defended his colleague, characterizing the calls for an investigation as a vile slander campaign, reminiscent of the communist era. So far, there is no direct evidence of Semjén's involvement in abuse against children. Georgie Suzuki says that Semjén personally treated him well from the start, possibly even too well.
Он сразу же ко мне проявил какую-то
He immediately showed me a kind of warmth,
теплоту,
friendliness.
дружбу. И
We even began a
даже
personal
начали вести
correspondence,
личные
and
переписки.
already at that
И
point,
уже на тот момент
you could
чувствовался
sense his
его
ultimate goal,
какую-то конечную
an
цель,
unusual kind of friendship.
необычная дружба.
Suzuki is convinced that even if Semjén did in fact seek out young inmates, he will not face punishment in Hungary.
Proof that he visited the children's home most likely does not exist and will not exist, because after all, he is a state official. He will act very carefully.
Hilarion, of course, is not the first Russian clergyman to be suspected of working for the state and its intelligence services. Orthodox priests have always been involved in this. The most notable recent examples are both Russian patriarchs.
Both Alexei II and Kirill have a reputation in Europe as KGB agents. The Swiss newspaper Tages-Anzeiger reported that in the 1970s, the future Patriarch Kirill, operating under the codename Mikhailov, worked for the KGB in Geneva. Agent Mikhailov was tasked with gathering information on members of the World Council of Churches and influencing their stance toward the Soviet Union. In total, Kirill visited Switzerland more than 40 times. He claims he traveled around the country to better understand the lives of the people. His nephew, Mikhail Gundyaev, is still the Russian Orthodox representative in Geneva. Recently, someone vandalized the door of the church where he serves, painting the letter Z on it. After the start of the war in Ukraine, Patriarch Kirill became the first person placed on the Czech sanctions list. EU sanctions might have been avoided thanks to Hilarion's intervention in Hungary, but the Czech Republic gave Kirill personal attention, accusing him of religious justification for atrocities committed by the Russian army.
Сегодня особая молитва наша о вооруженных силах, о наших воинах, с которыми связывается надежда на безопасность, на свободу, на подлинную независимость нашей страны.
Czech senators have noted that since 2014, the Russian intelligence agency's use of the Russian Orthodox Church has steadily increased, yet the organization retains its status in the Czech Republic. The country has tens of thousands of Orthodox parishioners, Russians, Serbs, and Ukrainians. After the start of the war, Czech Orthodoxy experienced a split. Some priests support Ukraine, while others support Russia, refusing to condemn the war. Not coincidentally, Putin enjoys the strongest support among parishioners in Prague and Karlovy. After all, Archbishop of Prague, Mikhail, born Michal Dandar, studied at the Leningrad Theological Academy in the late 1960s. The same years as Patriarch Kirill, Czech media explicitly refer to him a classmate of the Moscow Church's primate. During the communist era in Czechoslovakia, Dandar was an agent of the State Security Service, working under the codename Misha. In the early 2000s, he ended up in Russia.
Давай по новой, Миша, все.
The priest worked in Moscow for 4 years, and in 2015 became Archbishop of Prague and the Czech lands. In this position, as repeatedly noted by Czech publications, he works in the interests of the Kremlin and the Russian Orthodox Church, even conducting services in Russian.
Я вспоминаю мою як священническую пастырскую деятельность за границей, именно в Германии, коли я служил 9 лет, то есть мой первый приход, первая парафия была в Дрездене.
In 2019, Dandar refused to recognize the autocephaly of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchate. He regularly visited Karlovy, attending services at the church of former rector Leszchenyuk. In 2022, he met in Budapest with Hilarion. In 2023, Dandar appeared in a photo with members of the biker club, the Night Wolves, famous for their praise of Putin. In this photo, to the bishop's left stands a nun dressed in black, Abbess Nectaria. Formally, she is the head of the women's monastery of Vladenia near Prague and a protege of Dandar. This monastery has Russian sponsors, who seemingly needed the right abbess. Since 2022, it has housed, among others, refugees from Ukraine. The Russian owners of the monastery likely aim to ideologically influence them. Nectaria claims her secular name is Klavdia Romanova. It is known that she was born in Perm and lived in Kherson, Ukraine. But since 2001, Nectaria has resided in the St. Nicholas Chapel, a few kilometers from Karlovy. This chapel was built in the early 2000s by Russian businessman Nikolai Stepanov. Orthodox believers call it a rectory, although in reality it is a comfortable house attached to the chapel. She also appeared in the Church of our Saints Peter and Paul. Among her other charitable activities, for example, she blessed the cars of Russian businessmen from Karlovy. At the end of 2022, Dandar appointed Nectaria to lead the women's monastery near Prague. For this reason, the previous abbess, Valentina, originally from Ukraine, was dismissed. In 2023, Czech TV reported that police had opened a case against the bishop himself. Dandar was suspected of transferring the chapel and house to the Orthodox Society of St. Cyril and Methodius without the knowledge of the church or the state, which had been established literally a year before the secretary and right-hand man of Dandar, Igor Strizhelets, studied in Moscow until 1989. He is also a former KGB officer. In 2023, he was officially dismissed from the Prague diocese for economic reasons. In reality, this followed accusations of connections with Russian businessmen, including the former mayor of Derbent, a state Duma deputy from Dagestan named Kizria Bakarov.
Эти вещи, они нету их заложено в бюджете. Вот сейчас Сульман 1,5 миллиарда платит. Из них 16% остаются в городе, остальные деньги уходят туда.
Abakarov, a member of United Russia, is under sanctions from the European Union, the United States, and other countries for supporting the war in Ukraine. He is an old acquaintance of billionaire and Senator Suleiman Karimov. Until at least 2018, Abakarov had business in the Czech Republic. After the scandal with the Church of Saints Peter and Paul, the Czech Republic declared the rector of the church, Archpriest Nikolai Lešenyuk, persona non grata. He had served in the Czech Republic for over 15 years, but he was stripped of his residence permit and expelled from the country. Almost simultaneously, the Russian Orthodox Church dismissed him from the post of deputy head of the Department for External Church Relations. After all, why would the church need a spy who cannot work abroad? After Lešenyuk's expulsion, the Russian church rushed to protect its property in Karlovy from sanctions. And it succeeded. At the end of last year, Podvory transferred the church itself, the rector's house, and the surrounding lands with Villa Sofia to the Hungarian diocese. The Czech authorities did not manage to prevent this. It seems Moscow believes that under Hungarian jurisdiction, Russian property will be better protected. This is not surprising. Hungary has consistently opposed EU sanctions against Patriarch Kirill, and it was from Hungary that the Russian Orthodox Church sent a priest to Karlovy as a replacement. Unsurprisingly, he also turned out to be an agent of Russian influence.
Looks like the Patriarch has inspired every priest to fancy themselves a spy, if not a Soviet agent, then at least James Bond.
The Insider's journalists continue their work despite pressure from Russian authorities. You can support them by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel. If you'd like to further support their efforts, consider making a donation by clicking the link in the description below.